I see that the expansion of the Islamic empire is a proof for Islam.
Why did it stop at Europe's borders, so to speak, if it was a miraculous expansion?
Yeah, it stopped out because of it wasn't successful there.
Ladies and gentlemen, your sweet Zionist prince to all the traveling clat, back live here from Israel. We're taking a look at a clip today between Muhammad Hijab and Jordan Peterson. My first time ever watching publicly anything about Muhammad Hijab. I'm not a big fan of this guy.
People in the West must realize that Islam is fully capable of peace. This is what must be realized. How do we know that? It's not despite the Quran and the Sunnah or the sayings of the Prophet and the actions, but it's because of them. The Quran says, "Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu."
Even with people outside the faith?
Yes, especially with people outside the faith.
Why especially? Why especially? Is that part of the tradition of hospitality in some sense?
Yes, because if you break a contract with a non-Muslim, then you're driving them away from Islam. Okay, so
yes, that's definitely true. That's absolutely
so remember,
true.
Islam is attempts to attract people to its own religion.
Do you think that there are other things that I've said about Islam that we could talk about right now that I could clear up? And, you know, because I don't want elephants under the carpet. I don't like elephants under the carpet or snakes under the carpet. The other thing that I find upsetting, let's say, is the civil war in Islam.
Yeah, well, yeah. The Prophet didn't tell people to fight each other. I mean,
fair enough.
Islam doesn't say that. Islam doesn't say there should be a civil war. In fact, it was predicted, but it was never encouraged. Islam is categorically against civil war. Islam is clearly for pluralism. It's not for compulsion. These misnomers and misconceptions must.
So fair enough. And as I said, I know that the Protestants and the Catholics were at each other's throats for years, and despite the fact that of there being no justification for that, let's say, or quite the contrary in the Gospels. So this isn't a problem that's unique to Islam, but it is an ongoing problem in Islam. And it's not like there isn't sectarian strife in the West. I also understand that. And so that makes people watching the religious community, say, wary because, well, for obvious reasons. And so I know you can't answer this question in totality, but Islam hasn't been able to bring its own house into unified order. And so why do you think that is? And how is that related to Islam itself?
You made this point many times, and I'll tell you something again. Just because there's multiple interpretations of something, it doesn't mean that that thing is false. Like there may be multiple interpretations of the killing of JFK. It doesn't mean that JFK didn't get killed. People differ on things which, especially if there's a lot of those people, which there can be more than one interpretation about. Now, in terms of body count, there was actually a book that was written. And there was a chapter of the book by, I think his name is Nazir Sheikh. And he done a study looking at the numbers of people that have been killed in all the major world religions. And he puts Christianity firmly at the top. I mean, this doesn't require too much historical research anyway. Look at the 30-year war. Compare that with any war.
Look,
any war in Islam.
Okay. So the point you're making, is twofold. It's not, the necessity for civil war isn't embedded in the doctrine. Yes. And there's no reason to throw stones at the Muslim world when we could perfectly well look to our own history. Exactly. And I do think what we should do is look to our own history. I really believe that. And I believe that we all carry historical guilt for the bloodshed that's preceded the structure of all of our societies. But in the West, we look at the Muslim world and we see that it's riven apart. And we wonder, well, I know there's a hypocritical element to that. I'm not claiming that there isn't. It's not like we have our own house in order, but
you have to remember something else. You have to remember there was a colonial reality that existed where Britain, France, and many of the European countries and the Western European extensions, they dominated the Muslim world for the last 200-300 years. And so,
but I don't think that's particularly good argument.
No, it's very good argument.
Hang on a sec. I don't want to knock it away completely. Yeah. The rift that I'm talking about, though, was evident far before that. Now, the fact of that colonial complication, that could well be. The fact of that colonial complication could well be a contributor. I know the nation-state lines, first of all, were imposed. They were imposed quickly. They were imposed arbitrarily and partly that was a consequence of, what would you say, having to do a lot of things very quickly in the aftermath of a terrible war. I'm not trying to excuse it, but it was complicated. And I know that that's left the Middle East in this, group of nation states that now comprise the world in a very complicated situation. So it's a reasonable point, but the rift was there before. And so...
Well, okay. Here's what I'll say to that. Yeah, there are myriad contributory factors to why, and I still don't see how Islamic countries, there's like almost 50 Muslim majority countries, are in general, like you made a point about economic potential one time. You said that.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because, well, that's another thing that's quite a mystery, is that comparatively speaking, per capita, the Muslim countries are not that productive economically.
There's 4 Muslim majority
in what
countries.
sense?
There are 4 out of 10 Muslim majority countries in the GDP per capita top 10. Brunei, Qatar, Kuwait, and Saudi Arabia.
Yeah, well, I'm not sure that I'm willing to grant the fact that most of that wealth is generated by oil as a indicator of productivity.
Still, the point stands is you said per capita GDP.
Yeah, but yes, fair enough, and you were right to call me on that. That isn't what I meant. I'm sorry, because I don't think no, I do. We got to get the words right here. We got to get them exactly right because these things matter. That oil wealth is often a curse as well as a blessing. So outside of oil wealth,
you have Brunei. Brunei is another country that's in the top 10.
So let's talk about Brunei. What have they done right in your estimation?
I don't know much about Brunei, but I know they're in the top 10. I have to be honest with you. Pragmatically, Islam is doing the best because if you're talking about evolution, then we're talking about reproduction and survivability. And Islam has got the highest birth rates in the world today. It's the fastest growing religion by a mile. By 2100, it will be number 1. So in your definition, it should be the most true, by the way.
Now, you described yourself as a traditionalist as opposed to a liberal Muslim.
Yes.
And we were talking a little bit about Mustafa Akyol. And so why for you is the traditionalism particularly important? And why should that carry more weight than, let's say, attempts to hypothetically liberalize Islam? What is it doing for you?
Look, we have, and this goes back to the pragmatism point and the postmodernism point. Islam gives you moral anchorage in and of itself. We believe Islam itself has an inbuilt flexibility, but objectively, from a correspondence theory perspective, it's an outside truth, which is hard, which is strong, and which can oppose and destroy postmodernism and nihilism. And that's what I think a lot of your followers want.
So you think that a traditionalist grounding is a firmer foundation as far as you're concerned?
When a liberal decides that they want to fuse Islamic ideas with Islamic ideas with liberal ideas, they're almost
okay, fair enough. I can understand that, and it's partly why I have some sympathy for the conservative perspective.
Just one point.
Okay, yes.
So they're admitting that there's almost an admission that Islam is not complete and it's not perfect. We believe Islam is complete and it's perfect in its guidance, and we believe we have evidence for that. Whether it's the prophets.
Yeah, well, okay, but there's two problems I have with that, I would say. I mean, look, and I'm taking your point seriously, and I understand the utility of firm foundations as a bulwark against chaos. Okay.
Yes, of course.
So, but here's 2 problems I have with that. It's not easy to protect yourself if you're a traditionalist against the temptation towards an authoritarian interpretation. And flawed as we all are, when we approach, let's say, sacred texts, we also have to remember that it's us who are reading them. And divine though they may be, that doesn't mean we're perfect in our receipt of their message. And so it's hard. What the danger on the more traditionalist side is the slide into authoritarian certainty, as opposed to the slide into chaos on the more liberal side.
Well,
so how do you personally defend yourself against that?
Well, first of all, you've said one time, I think, in a lecture that one of the miracles of Christianity is render unto Caesar first. Render unto Caesar what belongs to Caesar, and render unto God what belongs to God. What if Caesar is Hitler? Then you've got authoritarianism all over again. So I think
definitely.
So
but you didn't answer my question, though. Look, it was a technical question. It's a technical question. Look, and maybe I'm wrong in the formulation, and you can tell me if you think I am. Yeah. What I see as a danger on the liberal side is the possibility of a descent into something like chaos. That's hopelessness and despair. Okay. But what I see on the more traditionalist side, let's say the conservative side, is a retreat into a kind of authoritarian certainty. And those are twin temptations that might be, what would you say, specific to given temperaments. And I was asking you personally, like you're a traditionalist believer.
Yes.
How do you protect yourself against the temptations of overweening certainty?
All right, I got you.
Okay.
Yeah, no, I don't. In terms of certainty, I strive for it. In fact, we want it. We don't want to. The problem is not.
But how do you rectify error? Like, you're not perfect, obviously.
No. Me personally, of course, I'm not perfect, but we believe we follow a perfect guidance.
Right, but you follow it imperfectly.
Yes,
right?
I am.
And there's the rub. Right. Yeah. So that's my point, is that given that you have to follow it imperfectly, given that you're imperfect, how do you defend yourself against inappropriate certainty? Because look, if you're imperfect, it means you think you're right about things you're not right about. That's the definition of imperfect.
Compounded ignorance, right?
How do you know how is it that you can protect yourself against being overweening?
Now, this is a good question. You're going to get me in trouble with this kind of thing right now. Here's the thing. The term warlord that you use with the Prophet, you've never used with Harry Truman. You've never used with Roosevelt. You've never used with Winston Churchill, all of which conquered countries, literally, in wars. Because I feel like there is a bias there. And you've actually never used it with anybody else aside from the Prophet Muhammad in your public output. And I think that's unjustifiable. I think that you have biblical prophets like Moses, you have biblical prophets like Joshua, you have the Jesus in his second coming, all of which were warrior prophets, and you've only used the term warlord with the Prophet Muhammad, and I think that is unjustifiable. I think what is it that what makes someone a warlord then? If it's conquering lands, then Harry Truman is a warlord. Then and so on and so forth.
Fine, you pushed back on me, so I'll push back on you to some degree.
Okay.
Well, it's certainly the case that the expansion of the Islamic Empire was accomplished by a tremendous amount of warlike activity, and that wasn't defensive. Now, look, I understand that monotheism is a difficult state to attain, and that monotheistic societies have emerged in the midst of conflict throughout human society. I understand that, and I'm not even saying that there's something exceptional in that regard about Islam, although the rate at which it happened was quite remarkable. But it presents us with a problem, doesn't it? I mean, it presents everyone with a problem. And the problem is, well, for example, the problem is reconciling the idea of turning the other cheek with the idea of a just war, a defensive war, or an expansive war for that matter. And of course that issue is relevant to Islam because Islam exploded outward and produced the biggest empire the world had ever seen in the space of a few short centuries.
Yeah, but Dr. Jordan Peterson.
So then you ask, well, what's the spirit? What is the spirit that animated that? And is that attributable to the Islamic doctrines themselves? Yes, I don't know the answer to that.
No, let me tell you the answer to that, okay? And this is what I want to tell you conclusively, and this will help build bridges, honestly, because we can maintain the warlord thesis, we can maintain the expansionist thesis, but here's what I'll tell you. Islam has a capability to be expansive, and it also has a capability of making peace treaties. And it does, and it should do whatever's in its best interest, just like every country should do whatever's in its best interest. In the pre-modern world, we did not, I think this is highly anachronistic. In the pre-modern world, there was no such thing as the UN. It was a realist international relations framework whereby everybody was fighting everyone. The Roman Empire didn't care about it didn't care about you, quite frankly. It was expanding itself. The Persian Empire was expanding itself, and the Arabian Peninsula was in between both. And so it could have either been swallowed by those two other empires, or it could decide to, in fact, we will impose our government on them before they impose it on us. And it decided the former rather than the latter. It decided to expand. And in fact, the Prophet, in his weakest of times, he predicted that would happen. There was one war in particular where they were starving, and it's called Khandaq, and he hit a rock and he said, Futihat Rum, the Roman Empire has been conquered. He hit a rock again, he said, Futihat Faris, that the Persian Empire has been conquered. And then he knocked the rock again, he said this in his weakest moment. He said that the Yemen has been conquered. I see that the expansion of the Islamic Empire is a proof for Islam. And it's not just me, even historians say this. Barnaby Rogerson, he said the fact that Islam spread to the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire is equivalent to is equivalent to Eskimos taking over Russia and America. I believe it's miraculous, if anything, that this happened. But I don't think it's unjustifiable. I think actually Jordan Peterson, to be
then
completely
why
honest
did
with
it
you,
stop at Europe's borders, so to speak? If it was a miraculous expansion,
yeah, it stopped out because of it wasn't successful there. It wasn't. It stopped where it couldn't go further.
Oh, Jordan, that was a great question from Jordan Peterson. Why did it stop at Europe's borders? Because it wasn't strong enough to conquer the Europeans. Here's something I never really understood about Muhammad Hijab. He isn't an idiot. He is a smart, educated man. Not that you have to be educated in schooling, in my opinion, to be smart, but the man is smart. He's eloquent. He can express himself. He's not a full idiot as he makes himself seem to be most of the times. I find it amazing that Muslims like Muhammad Hijab, can't understand that we're here. We're part of this world. We're not going anywhere. You can't conquer us. I mean, you can try to put us into dhimmi status again, but we'll rise up. You know, the Muslims didn't treat us well. There were periods of time where they did, but overall, there's a reason why we have our own nation, is because we weren't comfortable living under you. You guys treated us like shit. And now we're our own entity. So you weren't able to conquer Europe, and now you're not able to conquer Israel. You cause a lot of terrorism, and it's a bad look for you. Anyways, hope you guys liked my commentary on this. Please do consider supporting the channel by buying some merchandise or becoming a patron down below on my Patreon. It goes a long way to support me, and I'll see you in the next one. I love you long time, class. Bye-bye. Man, these comment sections are insane. What do you mean? Literally every comment is just like making fun of Jewish people, saying some stupid shit like it was promised to them 3,000 years ago, kicked out of 109 countries, white colonizers, and then a bunch of Jews in the comment section getting triggered and calling it anti-Semitism. It's bringing me down. Okay, well here, take this. What's this? It's a white colonizer shirt from the travelingclat.com. And here, take a matching hat. Why do you want me to wear this? Because when we laugh in their faces, it triggers them more. Like for example, my grandparents were kicked out of Baghdad, Iraq. Right. So guess what? I'm your Baghdaddy. Get it? And boom, here's a hat with a kube on it. So you're saying when they make fun of us, just wear it? Precisely. What will trigger the stupid pro-pallies more than you proudly joining the 109 club for being kicked out of 109 countries? Or are you openly embracing being a white colonizer? Or even just acknowledging that everything was promised to you 3,000 years ago? Don't run from it. Embrace it. Bet. TheTravelingClat.com. Embrace the meme, embrace the Jew hatred, and laugh in their face. TheTravelingClat.com. If you don't want to buy any merchandise, the best way to support me is by donating on Buy Me a Coffee, my PayPal, or becoming a member on my Patreon. Your support is very much needed and very much appreciated. Thank you.